Listen carefully. It began one summer night in 1974, in the backwoods of Mississippi, where the air hung thick with humidity, and the roads were lined with pines that whispered secrets to the wind. Men in the counties of Jones, Perry, and Greene lived simple lives. Sawmills hummed, cotton fields gleamed with morning dew, and families prayed at small churches on Sundays. But beneath this quiet existence, shadows moved, and by the time the last body was discovered, 11 men had died, their blood marking the price of pride, gambling, and vengeance. 2 names would echo forever in fear: Earl and David Carter. They were born into hardship, orphaned young, and left to fend for themselves. Their father had died in Korea. Their mother followed soon after. Alone in a small creaking house at the edge of the swamp, they learned one rule: family doesn't run. Earl, broad-shouldered and slow to anger, was the steady rock. David, lean, quick, and unpredictable, was the spark. Together, they became unstoppable. On June 6, 1974, the brothers entered Bobby Finch's poker game behind an old lumber yard. Finch was known for high-stakes games and sharp cheating. The air was thick with smoke and whiskey. Men hunched over tables, dice rattling, eyes darting. Earl and David had $600 between them. By sunrise, they would walk away with more than $5,000. But one man could not accept defeat: Thomas Red Hensley, a tall mechanic with grease-stained hands and a short temper. He had borrowed to keep playing, and now owed the brothers $800. Humiliated, he spread a lie. The Carters cheated. Rumors in the county spread like wildfire, and soon 7 men owed the brothers money, and none intended to pay. By August 23rd, the Carters drove into town to collect. Red refused. He called the game unfair. That night, behind their father's shed, under the moonlight, David spoke plainly: "If men want to take from us, we take it back." Earl asked, "With what?" David lifted their father's old hunting knife. "With blood." They cut their palms, pressed them together, and sealed a blood oath. Red Hensley vanished on September 2nd. Witnesses saw him climb into a green Chevy pickup with a dented fender. 3 days later, 2 boys frog-gigging in a swamp found his body tangled in roots. 23 stab wounds, every finger broken, tongue removed. The sheriff, Ray Danner, stood over the corpse and said, "This isn't a bar fight. This is a message." Victim 2, Finch's cousin, was found behind the lumber yard, playing cards stuffed in his mouth. Aces and eights, the dead man's hand. Victim 3, Carter Boyd, lay in a dry creek bed, his throat nearly severed. Rumors grew. The Carters carved dollar signs into skin. They tortured before killing. They prayed before each cut. Some rumors were false. Fear, however, was real. By October, killings moved from gambling debts to personal grudges. A man who shorted Earl $20 on lumber dead. A man who insulted David at a bar dead. A rumor spreader dead. 9 graves marked the blood oath. The 10th man, Bobby Finch, disappeared on December 2nd. 6 days later, his body surfaced in the river, tied to cinder blocks. Hands missing, jaw shattered. Victim 11, Deputy John Halley, confronted the brothers on a back road. His cruiser was found idling. His body lay 30 yards into the trees, 6 bullets in the chest, a knife through his throat. Killing a deputy changed everything. The sheriff knew the brothers were no longer just criminals, they were fugitives above the law. Sheriff Ray Danner organized a manhunt across 3 counties. Roadblocks went up. Helicopters circled over the swamp. Bloodhounds followed faint scents. Volunteers armed with rifles joined the hunt. But the Carters knew the woods like the back of their hands. Every creek, ditch, and hollow was familiar. For 2 weeks, they slipped like shadows, hunting, watching, disappearing. On December 29th, dogs cornered them in a rotting hunting cabin near the Leaf River. Deputies demanded surrender. Silence. Then Earl's voice rang out. "Family, don't run." Gunfire erupted. 20 minutes. Walls splintered. Glass shattered. David lay dead. Earl emerged, bleeding, knife in hand. He didn't beg. He didn't deny. "Debts paid," he said, dropping the blade. The trial began in March 1975. 11 murders listed. More suspected. Witnesses testified. Gamblers, bootleggers, deputies. Earl never denied a single killing. Never blamed his brother. Never apologized. When asked why, he said, "A debt's a debt." 11 life sentences. No parole. He died in Parchman Prison in 1997. His last words, "Family, don't run." Roadhouses reopened. Gambling rules changed. Men no longer borrowed. No insults went unchecked. Because in 1974, 11 men learned the price of pride, and the Carters taught it was paid in blood. The days after Red Hensley's death were heavy with fear. People in the counties whispered, not in public, but behind closed doors. Mothers clutched children to their chests. Fathers walked the streets with shotguns slung over their shoulders. Roadhouses that once echoed with laughter and dice rolling were empty. Whiskey bottles remained untouched. Men spoke only in murmurs, fearing that even a glance could draw the Carters' attention. By October, the killings had expanded. The Carters no longer targeted only gamblers who owed debts. Personal slights became deadly. The line between money and pride had vanished. A lumber contractor named Robert Jenkins had shorted Earl $20 on a load of pine. When the Carters came calling, he had no way to make amends. A week later, his body was discovered hanging from a low branch in the woods. His face twisted in terror. Evidence suggested he had been forced to kneel before the killing, a warning to anyone else who might consider defying them. Then came Marvin "Slim" Henderson, a bootlegger with a sharp tongue. He had insulted David at a local bar, calling him a cheat in front of 8 men. That night, Slim disappeared. His body was found days later in the shallow waters of a creek, knife wounds marking his chest and abdomen. Locals whispered that David had taken a personal interest in his death. The 6th victim, Samuel Crowley, had spread rumors about the Carters using loaded dice. He had laughed at men in the roadhouse, claiming the brothers weren't as clever as everyone thought. He was never seen alive again. His body was discovered in a swampy ditch, pinned with heavy branches. His arms stretched unnaturally. Each killing sent a shockwave through the towns. People didn't sleep. They didn't gather in groups. They didn't even leave home after dark. The Carters were no longer just criminals. They were symbols of a lawless vengeance, operating above the law. The 10th victim, Bobby Finch, the very man who had hosted the poker game that started the chain of deaths, disappeared on December 2nd. He was careful. Too careful, some thought. But the Carters were more careful still. 6 days later, his body was discovered in the river, tied to cinder blocks. His hands had been removed, his jaw shattered. His face was unrecognizable, a final statement to anyone who might consider challenging the brothers. Then came Deputy John Halley, a man of principle and courage. He confronted the Carters on a back road alone, hoping to intimidate them or arrest them outright. His cruiser was found idling. His body lay 30 yards into the woods, 6 bullets in the chest, a knife through his throat. Killing a lawman sent the counties into chaos. Sheriff Ray Danner realized the Carters were no ordinary criminals. They were shadows in the night, ghosts in the swamp, Fear gripped the counties like a living thing. Roadblocks went up. Volunteers armed with rifles scoured the woods. Bloodhounds traced faint scents. Helicopters hovered over the swamp, their searchlights cutting through the darkness. But the Carters had known the land since childhood. Every ditch, every creek, every pine hollow was their domain. They moved with the precision of hunters, unseen and untouchable. For 2 weeks, the Carters evaded capture. Sheriff Danner worked tirelessly, following leads from locals, interrogating anyone who had interacted with the brothers. Some tips were false, meant to mislead. Others were genuine. But by the time deputies reached the location, the brothers had vanished. The townspeople whispered that the Carters were supernatural, that the woods themselves were helping them. Children refused to enter the forest, and adults avoided it unless necessary. No one spoke loudly. No one challenged the brothers. Then came December 29th. Dogs cornered the Carters in a decaying hunting cabin near the Leaf River. Deputies surrounded the structure, weapons raised. Megaphones called for surrender. Silence answered. Then Earl's voice, calm and deliberate, echoed from inside, "Family, don't run." Gunfire erupted. The cabin shook as bullets tore through rotting wood. Windows shattered. Glass sprayed across the floor. For 20 minutes, chaos reigned. When it ended, David lay dead, 3 bullets in his chest. Earl emerged, bleeding, knife in hand. He did not plead, did not deny, did not explain. "Debts paid," he said, and dropped the blade. The counties began to breathe again, but the cost had been staggering. 11 men dead. Families shattered. Communities scarred. Roadhouses reopened cautiously, the echo of the Carters' violence, a permanent shadow over every game of cards. Earl's trial began in March 1975. 11 murders were formally charged, though whispers suggested more. Witnesses recounted the horrors: gamblers who had fled, bootleggers who had seen bodies, deputies who had survived threats. The courtroom was tense. Families of victims wept quietly. Earl did not flinch. He never denied a single killing. He never blamed his brother. He never apologized. When asked why, he said simply, "A debt's a debt." The court sentenced him to 11 life terms without parole. He would die in Parchman Prison in 1997, his last words echoing the oath, "Family, don't run." The Mississippi blood oath faded from the headlines, but its legacy endured. Roadhouses reopened, but gambling practices changed. Borrowing became taboo. Insults and slights were no longer tolerated. The counties had learned a harsh lesson. Pride is a currency, and in Mississippi that year, it was paid in blood. The manhunt for the Carter brothers became the largest in the county's history. Roads were blocked, helicopters hovered low over the swamps, and deputies fanned out through the thick pine forests. Bloodhounds strained at their leashes, noses pressed to the ground, tracing faint scents through mud and fallen leaves. Volunteers armed with rifles joined the search, but every tip led to nothing. The Carters knew the woods like the back of their hands. Every creek, every ditch, every hollow was a path only they could navigate. Sheriff Ray Danner worked tirelessly. He stayed awake for days, coordinating searches, interrogating locals, and piecing together sightings. Some locals had seen the brothers moving silently, like shadows, through the pines. Others spoke of strange noises in the swamp at night, snapping twigs, distant shouting, the low hum of a motor. False leads abounded, but every genuine tip sent deputies racing, only to find an empty cabin, a disturbed patch of ground, or the faintest trace of a tire in the mud. Meanwhile, Earl and David moved with precision, avoiding roads, traveling only at night, hiding during the day. They scavenged food from abandoned cabins, used the swamp to cover their tracks, and slept under makeshift shelters hidden by thick brush. For 2 weeks, they were untouchable. The fear they had sown in the towns now extended to the very forces of law enforcement. December 29th arrived with cold winds and gray skies. Dogs had cornered the brothers in a decaying hunting cabin near the Leaf River. Deputies surrounded the cabin, weapons drawn, radios crackling with orders. Megaphones called for surrender. Silence answered. Then Earl's voice rang out, "Family, don't run." Gunfire erupted. Wood splintered. Windows shattered. For 20 minutes, chaos reigned. David lay dead, 3 bullets piercing his chest. Earl emerged, bleeding, knife in hand. He did not plead. He did not deny. He did not explain. "Debts paid," he said, dropping the blade as deputies secured the cabin. The counties began to breathe again, but the cost had been immense. 11 men dead. Families grieving. Communities scarred. The terror that had gripped the swamps of Mississippi was slowly lifting, but the shadow of the Carter brothers would linger forever. The courtroom was packed. Reporters jostled for space. Families of victims sat in the front rows, silent, their faces etched with grief. Earl Carter appeared calm, almost detached. 11 counts of murder were formally read. Witnesses recounted horrors. Gamblers who had seen the killings. Neighbors who had smelled fear in the night air. Surviving deputies who had been threatened. Every testimony painted a picture of methodical, relentless violence. The prosecution detailed each murder with chilling clarity. Red Hensley, first to fall, stabbed 23 times. Fingers broken, tongue removed. Finch's cousin, playing cards, stuffed in his mouth the dead man's hand. Carter Boyd, throat nearly severed, left in a dry creek bed. Each account caused gasps in the courtroom, the weight of horror palpable. Earl did not flinch. When asked why, he said simply, "A debt's a debt." No excuses, no apologies. The judge sentenced him to 11 life terms without parole. He would never leave Parchman Prison alive. The trial concluded with a sobering sense of finality. Families of victims left quietly, each carrying the scars of a year of fear. The Carters' reign of terror had ended, but the legend would continue to haunt Mississippi. Prison life was harsh for Earl, but he adapted. He became known for his silence and his calm demeanor. He avoided trouble where possible, but earned respect for his unyielding resolve. In letters smuggled out, he reflected occasionally on the events. Never with regret, always with a sense of principle. Debts must be paid. In 1997, Earl Carter died in Parchman Prison. His last words, consistent with the oath he and his brother had sworn decades earlier, were, "Family, don't run." The Mississippi blood oath faded from the headlines, but its impact endured. Roadhouses reopened cautiously. Gambling rules changed. Borrowing became taboo. Insults and slights were no longer ignored. Communities learned a harsh lesson. Pride is a currency. And in 1974, it was paid in blood. The legend of the Carter brothers became part of local folklore. Swamps that once hid secrets still whispered their story. Children were warned never to wander too deep into the woods. Adults spoke quietly of the green Chevy with the dented fender, of men who vanished in the night, of blood that had been spilled to settle debts. And when someone asked in Mississippi, what happens when a debt isn't paid? The answer remained the same: blood.